Now you're all in big, big trouble.
Bethesda are really crushing it lately, with Machine Games releasing Indiana Jones and the Great Circle, which may be one of the best video games related to a movie, and the mic drop explosion that was the Elder Scrolls Oblivion remaster, which, don't worry, I will be going back and taking a review at that at some point soon, but I think it's safe to say Bethesda are riding pretty damn high right now, and now id Software have released the latest release in the Doom franchise with Doom: The Dark Ages, and thanks to my mates at Bethesda ANZ, I got to check it out. And I gotta say, The Dark Ages is pretty damn satisfying.
Here's to feeling good all the time.
Set before the events of Doom 2016 and Doom Eternal, The Dark Ages has you return to the boots of the famous Doomslayer, just like you'd expect in a modern Doom game released by id Software and Bethesda. You will be ripping and tearing your way through hordes of familiar and new enemies. However, things are a little different here in The Dark Ages compared to Doom 2016 and Doom Eternal. Also, just quickly, for those of you who are looking for a review from someone who lives, breathes, and knows everything about Doom, you might want to check out my mate G-Man Lives, because my first experience playing and finishing a Doom game was with Doom 2016. Because, little story, as a kid, my brother showed me Doom 3 and it scared the living shit out of me, and it still scares the shit out of me. But I've played Doom 2016, Doom Eternal, and on the channel you'll find the reviews for the Ancient Gods Part 1 and Part 2, so Doom isn't a new experience for me, but if you're after a deep dive of the nitty gritty of the Dark Ages, I can't really provide it, but I can provide you my thoughts and opinion as someone who has played and finished Doom: The Dark Ages. Now I've just got some stats for those of you who want to know, but I was running Doom: The Dark Ages on my PC, and I was running a completely maxed out graphics on a 4090 graphics card, averaging about 90 frames per second. Now personally, I didn't have any frame rate drops or anything like that that affected gameplay, nor did I have any crashes, but your mileage may vary depending on your hardware. This is also my first experience playing and reviewing a Doom game on PC as well, because, well, the Ancient Gods and Doom 2016 and Doom Eternal was all played on Xbox. This is the first time I'm doing it on PC. So it is a bit of a night and day difference with how quickly you can move and change your weapons and how you get used to sort of the gameplay going from controller to mouse and keyboard. Now, as I just mentioned, Doom: The Dark Ages is set before the events of Doom 2016 and Doom Eternal, where the Slayer is fighting alongside the Night Sentinels against the armies of Hell. Now, the overall plot and story premise does make it a little easier for newer fans of the series to experience their first Doom game, and the plot is relatively easy enough to pick up.
Relatively? Well, there's bound to be some splashback.
Now, I'm not going to spoil the events of the story, and I'm being selective with the cutscenes that I'm showing, but the overall premise is that Prince Azarek is after an artifact that will give him a fuckload of power, allowing him to reign over the demons of hell and stand against the Doomslayer, as the Slayer is the only thing that the demons of hell fear. So, if Azarek gets this artifact, he can then defeat the Slayer, and naturally, he'll reign in hell. So, Azarek and the demons of hell lay siege to the Night Sentinel to go after this artifact that they're looking for, and it's up to the Doomslayer to stop Azarek and, you know, slay demons.
Just when I thought I was out, they pull me back in.
As you can see too, the game isn't set in space stations on Mars. Well, kinda, but it's also not set in destroyed cities on Earth. But Doom: The Dark Ages is sort of set in this alternate world where sci-fi and medieval come together. And yes, there are some sci-fi elements here and there with the makers, but also castles, siege warfare, giant dead behemoth titans whose bodies form like landscapes on planets, and it's just old school metal combat with sharp weapons and brutal, gory gunplay. Speaking of the gunplay, the gameplay here in Doom: The Dark Ages is what you'd expect if you've played Doom 2016, Doom Eternal, or even games like the newer Wolfenstein series. Bulletstorm maybe, or my favourite Australian title, Bears in Space. But set in a merged world between sci-fi and fantasy and being a prequel, the flow and pacing of combat here in The Dark Ages is a little different. Now, Doom 2016 gave us a decent variety of weapons and introduced glory kills, and Doom Eternal had the meat hook, dashing, giving us increased movement and such, but The Dark Ages is slower. There is no dashing here, there's no zipping around on a meat hook, there is no shoulder-mounted grenade launcher or shoulder-mounted flamethrower. Instead, you've got a shield to block incoming attacks, but also you have a shield to attack with. Character movement here is quite slow in the Dark Ages, especially sort of at the start, and it's emphasized too with the sound design, hearing the Doomslayer's heavy boots slamming around on the battlefield, a little bit like how, say, Space Marines would stomp around in Space Marine 2 and if you played Bolt Gun. But while the movement is slower here, the barrage of enemy attacks in the Dark Ages isn't any different. Now, I'll get to weapons in a little bit, but the bread and butter of Doom the Dark Ages is the Slayer's Shield, which actually might be my favorite ability and weapon in a Doom game. Like, it's up there with the super shotgun and the chainsaw, and I think it is leaps above the Crucible, at least in my opinion. But when you start the story, the shield is used for, well, standard blocking attacks. By holding down the relevant button, depending on what system you're playing on, the Slayer will bring up the shield to block attacks. And as you can guess, the shield has a little health bar itself, so if you use all of the sort of health, if you will, or the shield's ability while blocking, you won't be able to block for a short period of time. Now, with that, enemies have two variety of attacks, or two variants of attacks. The red attacks, which can simply be blocked, or you can just strafe and avoid and get out of the way of them, or green attacks, which can be parried and sent back towards enemies. For example, the Stalker Imps will fire a giant cross fireball at you, and if you parry a green one, you will send it back to an imp faster than an old man trying to send back soup in a deli.
A hole in one, huh?
But range attacks aren't the only things that can be parried, as some enemies, like say the Hell Knights, don't overly use range attacks, but they will run and jump into combat into you, and you can parry these attacks, leaving them exposed for a moment. Or larger demons like the Cyber Demon can actually be parried when they strike, and for the Cyber Demon you kinda need to get up close with them and parry their attacks, because any of their attacks, even their ranged attacks, can really fuck you up if you're not being careful. In the second mission and for the rest of the game, you will get an upgrade for the shield, turning it from a standard shield to block attacks to a heavy metal version of Captain America, where the shield gets a motorized chainsaw blade wrapping around the shield, even with this little pull to start chain, which I don't know why, it always got a laugh out of me. But the shield can then be thrown around the room to immediately take out smaller targets like zombies, normal imps, or demon soldiers in one hit, or they can actually be impaled into larger demons, stunning them for a few moments, so you can either then deal some uninterrupted damage to them, or you can focus on newer targets. A little similar to the Leviathan axe in God of War, but the shield saw here in Doom the Dark Ages feels really damn satisfying to throw around and catch, and I loved seeing a room of lesser demons to then just bounce my shield saw off of them. Naturally too, the shield saw can be upgraded, and it is needed for some enemy varieties as well, like say shielded enemies. Now, standard hard metal shielded enemies can block your attacks, and the shield saw will do nothing to them. However, if you heat up an enemy's shield by say pumping a heap of shotgun rounds into it, you can then break their shields and shatter them with the shield saw, and then you'll immediately be rewarded with armor pickups. And a little bit later in the game you will find the same variants, but instead of hard metal shields, they will have shields made out of plasma energy. And you can upgrade your shield saw that when you throw your shield saw into the energy shield, it will then automatically target nearby demons, bouncing off of them before returning to you. So if you see a heap of cannon fodder enemies and one singular energy shielded enemy, they would get owned harder than Grum's fight with the Assassin's Creed Twitter account.
You're gonna cry in the car.
Now, later in the story, without getting into any spoilers, you will unlock upgrades for the shield known as runes, and these activate when you parry attacks. So not only will you send range attacks back to enemies, or you will stun a melee attack, but a rune might say have spectral daggers that shoot out and attack nearby enemies, or you will get a shoulder mounted cannon that will auto target an enemy in front of you, but it will only activate when you parry an enemy attack, so you can't just use it at any time. So if we're just looking at the shield here, the shield is used for standard defense, but then you've got the shield saw for, used for offense, bouncing it off enemies in a room, and in some instances it can keep you alive a bit longer because, you can throw it off against a shielded enemy and you can get some armor back, or you can throw it into a plasma shielded enemy and take out some of the lesser demons. But then you've got runes on top of that, which then help provide you some crowd control too. And I think it's a pretty versatile ability and weapon and defensive capability. That's probably the reason why it's my favourite. But alright, what else is there besides the Slayer's shield? Well, you've got standard weapons like you'd expect in a Doom game, like the combat shotgun, the super shotgun. There's a play on the plasma gun with the accelerator, but then there's the replacement of the standard assault rifle, or maybe not replacement, but in this medieval world of an assault rifle, you get the shredder, which rapidly fires out nails. Then you've got the chain shot, which basically is a rifle that fires a literal ball and chain at targets. It does really good damage and it can remove armor from enemies and exposing up some weak points, but it is a gun that physically fires a ball on a chain and there is no reload. So it's a bit like, say, a fishing rod. You fire the ball out, if you miss your target, and you've got to reel it back in. So it does leave you exposed if you missed your targets. But if maybe you saw the video on Bethesda and Doom's social media pages, then it comes as no surprise that my favourite weapon is the Skull Crusher. It is a weapon that literally puts skulls into a vice and crushes them and fires the shards of skulls at enemies.
I hate to say it, but yeah, not to be contradictory, but it's very metal.
Now, the Skull Crusher is sort of like a short-ranged, wide-reach, quick-fire scatter shotgun, like a flak cannon. And it fires pretty damn quickly, but it's also very easy to get lost in the constant animation of skulls being crushed. Now, I know I've run out of ammo just by watching the skulls rather than watching what I'm shooting at.
Skulls for the Skull Throne!
But we've also got some access to some melee weapons as well, but they more so take a back seat when it is compared to, say, the shield and, well, the fucking guns. But each melee weapon here runs on a cooldown system and can be recharged by picking up ammo for them, a little bit like the fuel system for the chainsaw in the older sort of Doom games, or it can recharge over time. Now, you'll start off with a gauntlet, which I'll admit I didn't really use, and I just preferred to use the shotgun and shield combo, but not long after that you will get the mace or flail, and it is pretty damn good and works as a great way to remove armor from demons, but also to set them on fire so then they drop armor pickups. And then finally you have a proper mace. It has the longest cooldown time, however when you hit someone with the mace, they will give you basically ammo for all of your weapons straight away. Each weapon, and even the shield and the melee weapons here too, can be upgraded in the Dark Ages using gold, rubies and wraithstones, and by going to a shrine. Now, throughout each mission, or by completing challenges, or just by exploring the world, you can find gold bars and treasure chests that will reward you with gold, and you can spend that gold to upgrade your weapons. But when you've upgraded your weapons too much, the currency will then change from requiring gold to requiring ruby necklaces, and then once you've upgraded again to get the final upgrade for your gun and have the best version of, say, the super shotgun, you'll need to get the wraithstones. Now, as form of currencies go in this game, there's no microtransactions, don't worry. It's generally pretty easy to find gold throughout the level, and in some instances you will earn them by completing challenges like, say, defeat 20 enemies with a shotgun. But then to find ruby necklaces and upgrade your weapons further, they are a little bit harder to find, say, compared to gold, but they're more so found by exploring the maps, and you get them from some challenges here and there. Finally, you've got the wraithstones, which are relatively limited in the game, which will unlock the final upgrade for certain weapons like, say, the super shotgun fires more pellets with each round, and they'll generally require you to do some puzzling platforming challenges or destroying wolf statues hidden around a level, which is like drop a barrier that's keeping the wraithstone at bay. So there's less wraithstones to find, they require more time and attention, and you have to work to unlock them compared to finding gold and ruby necklaces. But on top of the upgrades as well, each weapon in Doom the Dark Ages has, let's say, an alternative. Sort of like 2 weapons for every ammunition type. Now for the shotgun, you've got the standard combat shotgun, and then you've got the super shotgun. The shredder, which is basically your assault rifle, then has the impaler, and the bone crusher, you've got the pulverizer, which acts like a shotgun, and then you've got the ravager bone crusher, which narrows up the firing arc, making it more directed towards an enemy. Now, each variant of these weapons will use different fire rates and use different ammo capacities. What I mean by that is the combat shotgun can be used more at range and can be upgraded to have, say, 3-round bursts and have additional fire damage, so you can get shield drops from enemies and stuff like that, where the super shotgun, you can have max ammo, but I think the maximum capacity you can hold at the start is around 13 shots for the super shotgun, but it is by far the best weapon when you get to close range. So if you're looking at, say, you've got a heap of shotgun ammo, how close do you want to get to enemies? Do you want to use the super shotgun? Do you want to use the combat shotgun? Kind of up to you. But speaking of demons and enemies, there are a variety here, and they're all pretty straightforward, but some have some twists. Now, we've got these shackling zombies that provide no real threat unless you forget that they're behind you and you're focusing on something bigger. Then there's the standard soldiers, there's shielded variants of soldiers that I mentioned that have the metal shields or the energy shields. You've got Hell Knights, Cacodemons, and they look a little bit different here. It took me a while to realize that they were Cacodemons, but then you've got Cyberdemons, Imps, Arachnotrons, the Mancubus, all the things you'd expect in a Doom game. But while being a new Doom game, we also have some new enemies as well, with the Stalker Imps, which are larger versions of Imps that fire more damaging projectiles. Then we've got the Nightmare Stalker Imps, which are invisible, sort of like invisible like the Predator. Then we have Pinky Riders, who are archers that ride on the top of, well, pinkies. We have Hell Tanks that come into play with the larger open world areas, which I'll come back to. We've got Komodos, which are giant lizard-like demons with a chainsaw pole arm. Agadon Hunters, which are proper assholes that kind of force you to get in close range combat, and they'll properly fuck you up if you're not careful as well. And without going into spoilers, we have some variants as well that work pretty damn well to sort of spice things up. Now, I'm not going to go into every demon available here in Doom the Dark Ages, but each variety of demon here in the Dark Ages is introduced to you appropriately, just like in Doom 2016 and Doom Eternal. You'll face off against a new demon one at a time, and you'll get used to their movements and attack patterns, and then before you know it, in the final mission, you're facing off against 2 Cyberdemons, a couple of Mancubusses, and then you've got shields running around, and then you've got a Pinky Rider, and you're sort of managing them all at the same time. But when you first fight them, it's one Pinky Rider, or it's one Cyberdemon. You're understanding the enemy before you're facing off against heaps of them.
That's good!
Now, if you've played Doom 2016 or Eternal before it, well, the general gameplay is pretty familiar here in the Dark Ages, but there are some changes. Now, as I mentioned, the gameplay is a bit slower, at least to start with, until you get into sort of a rhythm with it. But unlike Eternal or Doom 2016, the levels aren't linear with a little bit of exploration. There are some linear levels here and there, but the Dark Ages introduces small sandbox style levels. Now, at first, when it was sort of announced that they were going to do this, I wasn't sure how it would work, but surprisingly it's actually not too bad. Now, the sandbox levels or areas in these levels aren't too big. There's a fair amount of exploration with puzzles, walls to break, and in-level mini-bosses like demonic leaders who have sort of a permanent shield around them, and in order to defeat or drop their shield, you need to defeat their little army in order to sort of lower the leader's morale so then you can take them out. But then, when you take out the leader, they reward you with sort of a wicked glory kill, as well as a permanent upgrade to your health, your armor, or your ammo, increasing your total pool. But there's also side objectives outside of the main story objectives in these sandbox areas, as well as keys to find to open and unlock more hidden areas, which might reward you with gold, rubies, wraith stones, or even toys and collectibles out in the world. Or you might find a life sigil, which is basically a instant respawn if you die, and you can hold up to 3 of these at a time. But outside of the over-the-top, gnarly combat that you'd expect in a Doom game, the Dark Ages introduces new gameplay elements in the Dragon and the Atlan mech. Now, I'll start with the Atlan mech, where the Doomslayer gets to pilot and control a giant mech suit, and as no real surprise, you will face off against giant demonic titans. Now, when you do these missions, they're generally pretty quick compared to other levels, and the combat consists of punching, which will then charge up sort of a combo meter. With relevant levels of charge, then you can do a special attack. The higher the combo meter, the more powerful attack, like a lightning fist or a earthquake boot stomp. However, if you get hit by an enemy titan, you will lose all charge in your attack, so you'll need to build it up again from scratch. Now, these missions are pretty repetitive, and they are also pretty quick to finish too, but you will have portions where a large Atlan weapon drops down, and instead of punching your way through titans, you'll mow them down with a giant minigun or a giant rocket launcher, and if you dodge enemy attacks while you're using a weapon, you then sort of put a supercharged system into your barrel and you'll just deal more damage. But then we've got the Dragon combat, where the Doomslayer mounts this huge behemoth tech dragon, and we fly through tight caves, we fly around floating fortresses, above hidden sunken temples, and look, I won't lie here, I kinda actually enjoyed the dragon movement in the game, and I'll come back to this a bit later, but the dragon gameplay is flying around the world until you have to take out enemy targets like, say, a turret on a demon airship, or maybe even demon titans that are blocking a path, and the gameplay changes from a open world flying around to a you're locked in on a target and you just strafe around them, where you barrage them with gunfire and you dodge green and red attacks. And when you dodge a green attack, you will supercharge your weapons so you deal more damage until you either stun the Titan and you perform a pretty wicked glory kill, or you deal enough damage to a demon airship where you then create a opening for the dragon to land. You with the Doomslayer can get off the dragon and then you can roam around the ship inside and sort of destroy the ship from the inside. But these new missions and mission types with the dragon and the Atlan mech change up the flow of the story and gameplay. Rather than the same great combat over and over and over in new locations with new enemies and challenges, the Dragon and the Atlan missions give you a bit of a break and provide something different. Now, while the Atlan missions are pretty quick and you are stuck inside the mech for 90% of the time, and they're pretty simple. It's punch, dodge, charge your attack, use your special attack, repeat. But the Dragon provides a bit more free roaming a little bit. Like, the Dragon missions have the standard Doom traditional combat, because you will use the dragon to traverse to another part of the world. You'll break a hole open in an airship, then you'll land with the dragon, shred your way through your demons as you normally would as the Doomslayer using your shotgun on the ground. Then when you're done, you remount your dragon and then you go off to the next area to do that. It's kind of like it's used as a vehicle to change the location of the combat. Yes, there is a dragon combat system. It's fine, it's not great, however, when you sort of realize that when you get later into the game, maybe use dragon combat for a little bit, and then you're just using the dragon to sort of take you to the next arena, fight something, fly off, take you to the next arena, and do that again. And that's why I kinda like the dragon. Now, Doom the Dark Ages gets a lot of things right, at least in my opinion. The overall vibe of medieval weapons mixed into the world of Doom works really damn well. The shield saw, the flail mace, the bone crusher, all super cool and metal as fuck. Having said that though, there are some things that I found personally didn't work for me. Firstly, Doom the Dark Ages does have a story. There are cutscenes here with main characters, main villains, and we see cutscenes and events in third person as the Slayer, which is kinda cool to see his presence as a character where civilians and other knights are a bit afraid of him. But as the Dark Ages is a prequel, the story just kinda starts with no real background for anyone new into the setting to understand what's going on. Like, who are the makers? Why does a game called The Dark Ages have sci-fi elements with plasma weapons and dragons with tech wings? Why is there a flying ship in the sky that beams the Slayer down onto a planet? None of it is really explained. However, I will say, unlike say Space Marine 2, which I think had a pretty similar issue for new fans of the series, in the Dark Ages there is a codex that you can go through and read about demons, weapons, characters, locations, so that does help. However, what I think this game needed was, let's say, a little bit like Lord of the Rings. It needed that Galadriel sort of intro prologue to set up this, give us the scene, set things up before we start playing, because the game just kind of starts and it might take you a little while to get used to it. Now, on weapon wise and general combat too, yes, the super shotgun is in the game and it is an amazing weapon, there is no problem there, but you obtain it in a pretty lackluster manner. For example, you unlock this game's version of the plasma gun in a science lab, or the skull crusher or the bone crusher from a dungeon sitting on a table, looking like a set piece. But the super shotgun, one of the Slayer's most iconic weapons, and it's sort of just a weapon that's found in a drop pod, where in previous entries before it, it was a relic. It had a little introduction to some kind, and the super shotgun I found is like an extension of the Slayer. And while it is in the game, the reload animation is fantastic because it looks like the Terminator cocking his shotgun, but getting the shotgun in the game, it's like it's just in a drop pod, you've got the super shotgun, off you go.
And I found something from Millhouse down at the mall too, a pup tent.
But speaking of demons though, what I did find weird though was that there was no demon or variant here that I dreaded facing against. Like, facing off against a cyber demon was more so annoying, but I was kind of expecting something like the Marauder from Doom Eternal. Now, when I first played Doom Eternal, even on the easiest difficulty, I struggled taking them out with how fast they would move, how their stun window would work, and I was playing this on an Xbox, so I was slower using a controller. So when the Ancient Gods DLC had 2 Marauders at once, it was pure nightmare fuel, and I think I lost weight from fighting them off because I was working that hard. but there wasn't a demon in the Dark Ages that gave me the same effect as the Marauders from Doom Eternal. It's a personal thing, but it's just something I wanted to note. My final negative though is the music. Now, the music here in Doom the Dark Ages is good. It is much better than the music in the Ancient Gods DLC. And in combat and in cutscenes, when the needle drops, it drops hard. What I did notice though is that the music here is only hardcore metal for combat and hard-hitting cutscenes. There were moments exploring open sandbox areas where you'd only just hear atmospheric sounds like battles in the distance or demons roaring, and that's really it. Where there was one level in the campaign that as well just had no music at all. Now I wasn't sure if that was deliberate or not, but it kind of felt a bit off. We're looking at Doom 2016 and Doom Eternal. The music by Mick Gordon was pretty damn good for its metal portions, just like the music in the metal portions here for the Dark Ages is really good, but there is no atmospheric music, there's no throat singing or chants, there's no tones to help set the scene. There are some great environments that we visit in the story, and I felt the only thing that was missing was some good atmospheric themes and vibes to sort of help set the mood. But honestly, I loved my time with Doom the Dark Ages. The combat is gory, it's meaty, it does exactly what 2016 and Doom Eternal did before it. We slay demons, we rip them open, we get blood covered all over us while listening to metal. The Dark Ages delivers. Graphically, as you can see, it's fantastic, and we get blood spraying on our shield and our weapons after we get up close in combat. Small little things that, sure, some of you might not notice, but for me, I was really impressed.
Pretty good. Pretty damn good, lad!
While I did find some personal issues here and there, I enjoyed the new gameplay aspects with the dragon and the Atlan breaking up the combat. It worked as a little bit of a palate cleanser from the gunplay, keeping it somewhat fresh, but not overstaying their welcome, as the Atlan missions are pretty quick and the dragon missions provide something different with its traversal and map movement. There's a proper story here with cutscenes, characters, and even some wicked costume designs, with Prince Azarek reminding me a little bit of Gary Oldman's Dracula, and while it did take me a little bit to figure out the setting and what's going on, after a few missions I found myself enjoying the plot and the events that take place. I think it's safe to say though that if you're a fan of Doom 2016 and Doom Eternal, then the Dark Ages is a simple no-brainer. But if you've never played a Doom game before, the Dark Ages works as a great way to test the waters out in this great series. And from here, you can go into Doom 2016, you can go into Doom Eternal, and then you can check out the Ancient Gods DLC. I was a little interested with how id Software would create another Doom game with how the Ancient Gods DLC ended, or would they move on to another title like, say, Quake, but I love what they've done with the Slayer here in the Dark Ages. His shield is brutal, his redesigned outfit is metal, and his cape is glorious. So if you're even slightly interested in Doom the Dark Ages, check it out. But if, like me, you've got childhood trauma from Doom 3, or you're wanting to throw your shield saw into imps like a badass version of Captain America, always remember to play with each other and play with yourself.